I'm honored to have your support. I'm honored to have your endorsement. And I think it should be said that to come out and support a challenger to a sitting Democrat, to a sitting incumbent, in a place where he's been in office for a long time, it takes some courage. It's not something that's easy to do, but I think Barry is doing it because he believes it's right. And ultimately, the reason I'm here, we talk a lot about service and character and leadership, the reason I'm here is because I truly believe in service. And you're someone, Barry, who has taken a serious commitment to serving your community, and I think you have a bright future in public service as well. So thank you very much. And let me just say a few words to the great city of Peabody. Mayor, it's an honor to have you here. And you lead an amazing community. And the support that I have found as I go around this district and I meet people in the community who are just ready for some change, who are ready to get Congress back on track, is incredible. And everybody, in a certain sense, who comes out and is willing to take some time to take part in the political process, to take a stake in our nation's future, to take some responsibility for changing the most broken Congress we have in our nation's history. You all deserve some credit for that. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. And of course, I especially want to thank all the veterans who are out here to support me. When you run for office, you look for a base. You got to have some base of support. For many people who've been in politics for a long time, it's the base that helped them get their political start. If you were a city councilor, it's the ward where you represent. That's your base. For me, the base is veterans, because I wouldn't be here if I wasn't a veteran. I'm not someone who grew up wanting to be a politician. In many respects, I'm a reluctant politician. But when I was in the war, I saw the consequences of bad leadership in Washington. I think Congress didn't know what they were doing when they sent us into Iraq and didn't have our backs when we were there. And the only way that's going to change is if new people run. Today we have the least effective Congress in our nation's history. And everybody knows that. We can't change it if we keep sending the same people back again and again. We simply can't change it. But what's unusual about this election and about the people in this room is we are all willing to take some responsibility for that change right here at home. You know, the phenomenon in America is that everybody hates Congress but loves their congressman. Everybody thinks that their representative is doing a great job. But we can't change Congress if we just keep sending the same back again and again. This is not time for more of the same. And in the same way that I saw what needed to change when I was in Iraq, I come back to the district where I was born and I see all over this district what things need to be changed back here at home. Jobs and the economy is the #1 issue on the minds of voters in the 6th district, and we need more good-paying jobs right here at home. The 6th has higher unemployment than the rest of the state, and yet we're a historic manufacturing center. We're a place where we ought to have good jobs for the middle class, not just for the upper class, where people ought to be able to earn a good wage, get a good paycheck, and really support their families. I have an economic plan to bring jobs back to the 6th district, and I have the experience in the private sector and working between the private sector and the public sector to make it happen. I also wouldn't be standing here without having had a good public school education, because I don't come from family money or political background. I'm still paying my college loans every month. And yet educational opportunity is not equal. Even in a state that has on average the best schools in the country, we have a lot of failing schools all across this district. We need to support our teachers. We need to hold our schools to high standards. And we need to get them the resources they need to succeed so that no matter which zip code you're born in the 6th district or anywhere in America, you have an equal opportunity for success. And the third thing I'll mention today is veterans. And I've been talking about veterans all year on this campaign. I get my health care from the VA. So I didn't need a scandal to unfold in Phoenix to understand that the system needs to be changed. But we need people to go to Washington who really understand that, who can actually change the bureaucracy, not just throw more money at the problem. We've never had fewer veterans in Congress in our nation's history. I don't think it should be a requirement that you're a veteran to run for office. It shouldn't be a litmus test. But we need more people with that kind of experience. We don't have a single combat veteran representing the state of Massachusetts in either the House or the Senate. We need that experience right here. I'm also aware, though, that for all the work that needs to be done, and for as much as I am honored to have you here to support my campaign, many of you are here today, not because of me, but because of General McChrystal. And it is a true honor, Stan, to have you here supporting me. I could spend a lot of time going through General McChrystal's resume, and it is unbelievably impressive. To be in charge of the war in Afghanistan, to have completely turned around special operations in Iraq. He is a man whose leadership experience is unparalleled, whose judgment of American foreign policy makes him one of the foremost leaders of our country, and whose service after he's gotten out is as inspiring as the service that he did within the military. But I want to tell you that Stan McChrystal is much more than that. He's also become a real mentor to me. It's wonderful that he's here today. It means a lot that he flew up from Washington. But we also have a call every 2 weeks where we just talk about the campaign, and we talk about leadership, and we talk about how we can be better public servants. And that means as much to me, and it means as much to this campaign as all the public events and press that you're doing today. When I went to meet General McChrystal at his office for the first time, I was going with Aaron on my campaign team, and we were down in Washington. I had been to the Commandant's Ball the night before, and we had a lot of debate about what to wear. It was Sunday morning, and we weren't sure if we should put on a suit with a tie or maybe a suit with no tie. It's getting a little bit warm in Washington. Maybe just a button-down shirt would be all right. We decided to go the safe medium option, which was a suit with no tie, and we showed up and knocked on the door at his office on a Sunday morning, and General Stanley McChrystal skivvies and a t-shirt just back from his run. He's a famous general. He's done a lot for our country. But he's also someone who gets what it means to be down to earth, to understand what it's like to be a leader, not just on the national scene, but for young guys like me who are just trying to make a difference in the world and need some guidance. So with that, let me turn it over to General Stanley McChrystal. Sir, it's an honor to have you here.
I will stop there because I'm ahead right now. So, Seth, thanks so much, and Barry, thank you, and it's a real honor to be here. Let me start by just putting a mental image in your mind that I'll come back to. Remember when a second lieutenant showed up? Either you were that second lieutenant, or you remember that second lieutenant showing up. And their gear was pretty new, and they looked about 13 years old. And they show up to your platoon, or to your company if you're senior to them, and you're wondering if they're up to it. And they announce that they have a Harvard degree, and the Lance Corporals are deeply impressed. And what do you care about? You don't wonder whether they know a lot about physics. You don't wonder where their family came from. You wonder, does that individual have the character needed to lead that organization? Did it have the character needed to take care of the people that they serve? You know they don't know how to soldier. You know they haven't been to war. They'll learn that. You can teach them that. But you wonder if they have the character. And that's the question. What you're seeing today here is something pretty special for several reasons. Until I made the decision to endorse Seth and his run for Congress, I have never endorsed any political candidate. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm not an independent. I've never done that. But I thought it was time to change it, and change it for one person. Also, it is very uncommon for a soldier to be here endorsing a Marine. Yep. But I'm getting over that cultural hurdle. I'm in counseling. I teach at Yale, and one of the things I do is work with the Yale football team, and if you saw last year's score, I'm getting over that too. And the point I'm making is, I'm doing this because, not because it's normal, not because it's easy, not because it's something I would automatically do. It's something very different because this is very different. Now we'll go back to our second lieutenant. And you give him a place on the battlefield, whether it's in Baghdad or Fallujah or Anbar or any other place. And a company commander puts the platoons out. They're supposed to have 42 men. They typically have about 25. And they give that young leader a problem to solve. And they don't tell him this is exactly how to solve it, because they can't. They don't know it well enough. Only that person can know the problem. And the problem's never easy. There's never a manual that says, put your people here, do this, and it'll come out just right. You think it will. You think there's got to be a book like that, but there's just not. Every time the problem is unique and different, and it takes judgment, and it takes leadership, and it takes maturity, and it takes courage, and it takes character. And then you watch them grow. And you watch them make some mistakes. You watch them make some decisions. You watch them deal with local elders. You watch them deal with headstrong, non-commissioned officers, brilliant privates, clueless colonels, and the general who comes in with no idea and decides to pontificate. And you watch them do that, and you watch them grow. So that's what we're about here today. That's why I'm here today. Because I believe that if we don't put that kind of character in Congress, then we are going to get what we send. And we ultimately are responsible because we get that choice. And so we get the chance to send the right people, and we get the chance to then ask them to show all the character for which we selected them. Then I think we'll make a lot of progress, and I think things will be very different. And I know that we can do that. It's a tough time in the world right now. It's a tough time in the United States. As you know, we're starting to come out of economic challenges, but those economic challenges, when you watch them on a headline, are one thing. When they are at home, they're different, but they're very real. We're going to have to work through those. There's a lot to work through, and it's going to be a lot of compromises and tough decisions. And if you look at the world right now, even though we've come out of more than a decade of war, if we think that we are suddenly going to say, well, wow, we're through that, we'll turn our backs, and it will go away, that's just not the experience of history, and it's not what I think. And so I think we are going to need, maybe even more than in the last decade, we're going to need very thoughtful, mature leadership on foreign policy, because it's going to be tough. The world is as tumultuous as I've seen it. And after this sort of initial swooning for the Arab Spring, the Middle East is going to be more difficult in the next decade than it has been in the last decade. And we can't change that. What we can do is decide how we as a nation are going to make decisions and deal with that. So I'm going to stop remarks there, and what I'm going to do is open it up for questions or comments that you might have, and anything's okay. Sir.
General, sir.
Stan.
I have a question for our candidate.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, the general just said, with the Mideast getting worse right now, the next decade will probably be worse than it has been. And with the drawdown of the U.S. Army, Marines, all the armed services, with sequestration, with the drawdown of forces, do you see a need now to increase those forces with the current threats coming up?
There's a gentleman standing next to me who's probably much more qualified to answer this question. No, I think actually it's a time when we can make responsible cuts in the defense budget, but we've got to make sure we don't lose sight of our priorities. One of those priorities is dealing with the hot spots in the globe today. Another priority is making sure that the troops on the ground get the support that they need. And there are a lot of corporate interests that influence the decisions in Congress about defense spending that ensure that we get all the high-priced weapons, but we don't always get what the troops on the ground need. That's something that I saw in Congress. And you can be sure that I'll be someone who will fight to ensure that whenever we have to make the incredibly difficult decision to put a young American man or woman on the front lines, that he or she has everything they need to do the job.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yes. My name is Bernie Musso, and I'd like to thank you both for your service as well as all the other vets in this area. It's a pleasure to be in this area.
Yes, sir.
But let me ask you a question, Seth. How, if I give you my vote, will you be able to go down to Washington with your principles and not have the system beat you down, okay? Because that's what happens down there. You try to make a stand and they're going to beat you down, and you're not going to get it. You're not going to do anything for me because you can't. How can you overcome that?
I think this is a great question, and it's actually a question I get a lot, because everybody knows right now the system isn't working.
No, I never voted for hope and change, and I got plenty of change and no hope. So we're in. Somebody's got to fix this problem somewhere, and maybe you can be the start of it, but someone's got to do something.
Look, it's a very fair question, and honestly, I got the same question when I went to Iraq. People said, Seth, you're going to be one of 155,000 troops in Iraq. What difference can you possibly make? But what I learned on the ground every day in that war was the impact that real leaders could have. People who are willing to do the right thing, even when it's difficult, when it's not politically convenient, who are willing to rise above the fray, to have their voice heard, to drive the debate, not just sit in the back and vote one way or the other. They can make a difference. And every single day in that war, even though I fundamentally disagreed with why we were there, I was able to have an impact and make a difference on the lives of other people. And there were other people I watched in Iraq, like Stan standing next to me, who had an even bigger impact because they were willing to go against the status quo. When General McChrystal arrived in Iraq, he had a special operations group, Joint Special Operations, that just wasn't getting the job done. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't working. They weren't getting missions accomplished. Sounds a lot like our Congress today. And he turned that system on its head. And he got people to work together who didn't want to work together. He got people to believe in a common goal, even if they had different special interests. And that's the kind of leadership that we need in Washington as well. You don't go down to Washington expecting to agree with everybody. Certainly not on the other side of the aisle, not even on your own side of the aisle. But you ought to be able to find some common ground. When I served in the Marines, just like for all of you who served, I didn't have a platoon made up of all Democrats. I didn't have a platoon made up of all Massachusetts or all Peabody Democrats. I had a platoon of young men from all over this country who came together with remarkably different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, different political beliefs, but at the end of the day, we were able to set aside those differences to do what's best for America. And fundamentally, I think that's what Americans expect of Congress as well. But it's not what's happening. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I do. If you go back to the way I think of the lieutenant and the leadership challenge to solve a problem, he can't go home when he wants to. He can't go home for 5 weeks of leave in the summer. They either solve the problem or people die. And it changes you as a leader. I think it matures you as a leader, and that's what I see in Seth.
Sir.
I'm Steve Bond from Salem. Served with the 101st Airborne Division, 1st 506 Infantry Regiment. Was unfortunately injured by a suicide bomber in 08 in Afghanistan. After getting injured, my whole thing was, finding a job. Right now, the stats right now are a lot higher than the civilian population. I guess civilians about 7.2%, veterans about almost 10%. So when I fortunately met my boss, he's the CEO for U.S. Pavement Services out of Woodburn, and he started a Pledge to Hire Veterans campaign where we reach out to not just the construction industry, but companies everywhere, and just try and hire one vet, see what it does, and also the suicide rate, about 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. That's a huge epidemic in this country. A lot of people don't realize. So my question is, what's your battle plan for, getting veterans jobs so they can come home?
Right, so the question is, what's the battle plan for getting veterans jobs when they come home? And let me just say, this is a real problem in America. Some people look at me and they say, Seth, you're a young veteran. You must really have a tough time finding a job if you want to run for Congress. So, but in all seriousness, there are some amazing statistics about veterans in this country. Veterans are disproportionately CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Veterans are also disproportionately homeless. So how does that happen? How do some veterans do so well, and yet some veterans can't even find a home? Well, I think it has a lot to do with just making that transition back from the war. Because if you make the transition successfully, then you take all those leadership lessons that you learned overseas in some of the most difficult environments on earth, and you're able to translate those into leadership and success back here at home. Not only getting a good job for yourself, but rising up the ranks and being a leader in the civilian world the same way that you had to be a leader when you were deployed overseas. But if you don't make that transition, and you don't get treatment for the problems that you have or the struggles that you have, post-traumatic stress is an entirely treatable disease, but you need to take care of it. And if you don't get that basic treatment, then you're not going to be able to succeed. One of the Marines from my platoon, his name's James Hassel, a real hero of mine. He saved the life of a kid from Vermont named Ryan. Ryan was hit by a grenade in a building south of Baghdad. And James put him on his back and carried him to safety through, frankly, withering machine gun fire. James absolutely risked his life to save Ryan's life. When James got out, like many veterans, he wanted to continue serving, and so he decided to go to nursing school. And he did well in school, he graduated, he got a job as a nurse so that he could save lives in the civilian world the same way that he had saved lives in Iraq. But he was troubled by post-traumatic stress, and he went to the VA to get care. But rather than giving him the counseling he needed, the VA just prescribed him medications. And at the age of 30, James died of a heart attack just from taking the drugs prescribed by the VA. That's not taking care of veterans. That's not helping us make the transition to being successful in the civilian world. Stan, do you have anything to add to that?
I do, and I think that when we think of a veteran, a young man or woman goes off, who sends them to war? People say, well, the President of the Congress. No, we, America, send our young people to war. We from towns like Peabody, we from cities, we from farms, we send our young people. We ask them to do something. When they come home, I think we still have that same responsibility. We ask them to go, and we need to be prepared to catch them. I think things like the Veterans Administration and others are critical big programs, but at the end of the day, we need a weave. We need a network locally, so when people come home, we don't lose sight of them. They're 4 years behind their peers typically in terms of networking for a job or whatever they did. It's a little harder to get connected in, and that's where I think we need in every neighborhood to assume part of that responsibility, like so many of you have here.
I know it's getting very hot, so we'll just take a couple more questions. Sir.
Well, on that note, is there anything you believe you can do to fix VBMS?
Is there anything anything to do to fix the Veterans Benefit System?
Yes. It's a system that has been reported to crash multiple times a month and has tremendous backlogs of veterans seeking benefits that could help them suddenly become productive in their life instead of scraping by with very minimum.
So the question is about VBMS, which is the administrative side of the VA, and I'll just tell you my personal experience with getting health care from the VA is I actually have a very good doctor. I have a very good primary care physician. But the bureaucracy that I have to go through to simply get an appointment, the bureaucracy that my friends and colleagues have to go through to get their claims approved is outrageous. And what we need to do to reform the VA is not just send more money so that they can incrementally decrease the wait times, it's to completely reform the bureaucracy. We need to change the VA so that it serves not World War II veterans with the veterans of this generation. And we're different. We have different needs. We're spread out. We don't have dozens and dozens of veterans in every community. So we need a VA that is designed to serve the current population of veterans, not the population 50 years ago. General, do you have anything to?
Left side. Left side.
All right. Yes, sir.
Mike Foley for Beverly, U.S. Army. My thing that angers me the most is for the general. The rules of engagement for our military. How the hell can the senior brass, forget the politicians, stand by, and when I see a story of a U.S. Marine lieutenant sent to Leavenworth for defending his platoon when he's being shot at, we could have never won the Second World War under these current rules of engagement. I can't understand it. And I'm wondering how the senior brass in our military feels about it.
Yeah.
And a few people speak up. General Amos, by the way, the other day, was great hearing from him. Thank you.
Yeah, great guy. Okay, I got a bad habit of being candid, and so I won't stop that. And I'll only tell you how one person feels about the rules of engagement. When we were in Iraq, it was not no holds barred, but it was just an incredibly difficult, violent place, and so the rules of engagement necessarily were reflected that. There was a lot of shooting, there was a lot of killing, and that had to be until we could get things under control. We certainly tried to prevent civilians from being harmed, but it was pretty intense. When I took over in Afghanistan in the summer of 2009, I went in and the Taliban was increasing their power, they had momentum and whatnot, and the first response was, okay, what we'll do is we'll loosen the rules of engagement, we'll bomb more, we'll kill more, and we'll solve this problem. And I went around the country and I spent time listening to people, and I realized that was exactly the wrong approach for that situation. The Afghan people were concerned whether America really cared about them. In 2001, the Afghan people had seen Americans in small numbers come. We'd use these little groups and we'd used precision weapons. And so the Afghans drew logical conclusions, rational conclusions, that we were omniscient, we knew exactly where the enemy was, and through our weapons we were omnipotent. We could hit anything we wanted to. Later in the war, when we used things like firepower, air power, and we made periodically mistakes, well-intentioned but mistakes, and killed civilians, they drew a conclusion that we were either stupid or we just didn't care. And they began this belief that if we were there to really protect them, why are we killing them? And they quite honestly would say, if this is your way to protect us, we'd rather not be protected. And so what was happening is we were losing the support of the Afghan people. So what we did was, I personally put in rules that said, okay, any lieutenant, sergeant, any leader can make the decision to use firepower to protect their people anytime they have to. You are never stopped from doing that. In fact, not only do you not only have the right, you have the responsibility to use that firepower. However, if you don't have to do that to save your people, if the Taliban are shooting from a compound, which this is what they would do, they would get at a compound a distance away and they'd shoot at you, hoping that you would drop bombs on it. Meanwhile, they would have either left outside the back of the compound or they'd stay there, but they'd keep the family there with them. You destroy the compound, you kill civilians, and everybody draws the conclusion that when the Americans come around, things get destroyed, civilians get killed. That's actually worse than having the Taliban around. And so as a consequence, what we did, we said, this has nothing to do with being nice, has nothing even to do with morality, although that's important. It really has to do, the only way to win that war was to convince the Afghan people that we were for them, and we were there to protect them. And you'd have been so proud of the Marines that went into Marcia, and I know there's one here tonight, the soldiers who went into other places, and they did what we called courageous restraint. They went into places even when it was more dangerous to do it that way, because they knew that if we were going to win, the only way to win was to not fall prey to the temptation to use too much firepower. I know that sounds difficult sometimes, and I would get cards and letters from people, but the service members on the ground were incredibly good about it. And they were incredibly mature about it, and they shot when they had to, and they didn't shoot when they shouldn't. And it made quite a difference. So I was just extraordinarily... What's that? Yes, sir.
Hi, Dave from Peabody. General, thanks for coming up to the North Shore.
My honor.
When you get sworn in this winter, what committees are you looking to be seated on, and what would be your first 100-day plan?
So the question is, when I get sworn in, what committees would I look to sit on, and what would be my first 100-day plan? A lot of why I'm running is because of my experience overseas, and being a part of making the decisions about sending troops into harm's way is a place where I would like to have an impact in Congress. Because as we're making decisions about Syria and Iran and Ukraine and Gaza, we need people who actually have credibility and experience. We need veterans on the Democratic side of the aisle, not just the Republican side of the aisle. And we need people who have the experience and the credibility to ask the really tough questions about putting young Americans in harm's way. But there are a lot of other things that we need to do for this district right here at home. Economic development is my #1 priority, and we need a representative who understands what it takes to create jobs, who can work not just with the public sector, not just with the private sector, but with both, to bring infrastructure to the 6th district, to rebuild our roads and railways, to inspire businesses to come here when they haven't come in the past. If you look at the city of Lowell, it's pretty inspiring what Senator Paul Tsongas was able to do to turn that city around. He took a concerted approach to economic development, and he showed that as a member of Congress, you could make a difference in your local community, bringing jobs back home, rebuilding the infrastructure, and turning a city that had become disillusioned into a city that had a lot of hope for the future. That is the kind of leadership that I want to bring to this district. And if I were elected tomorrow, what I would do is fix the problem at the VA, because that's a place where I can have impact immediately, even as a freshman. We need people who are going to roll up their sleeves and fix the problems in Washington, not just vote one way or the other on the issues. And there are actually relatively few members of Congress who do that, who actually stand up, who drive the debate, who craft laws and bring together the coalitions to get them passed. That is the standard that you should hold for me. That I am not just going to be a reliable vote, though I will be that, but that I will be someone who will be a leader in Congress in actually getting things done for this district and for the country. So it's getting very hot. It's starting to feel a little bit about like Afghanistan or Iraq right here, and we did not intend to recreate that experience as part of the afternoon today. But I want to thank you so much, every one of you, for coming. And I do have a request. We cannot win this election without your support. And it doesn't just mean that you come out to vote on September 9th, although that's incredibly important. It means that you help in other ways as well. We need volunteers. We need people to sign up to do a phone shift, to knock on doors on the weekend, to take our emails and to forward them to all of your friends so that everybody in this district knows that we have a choice, that we have an option. And at the end of the day, if they know everything about who I am and they still want to vote for someone else, that's fine. That's the beauty of an American democracy. But we need to make sure that everybody knows what that choice really is and what it means for the future of our representation here in this district. So I would ask you to meet some of the amazing people on my team on the way out, to sign up for a volunteer shift, to put your name down as someone who will take a real stake in making a difference on September 9th. And the last thing I want to ask you to do is, when September 9th comes around, please do vote for me. Don't write in General McChrystal, even though he was very impressive today. That's not going to help. Hopefully we'll get a chance to vote for you, sir, sometime in the future. But on September 9th, do make sure that you and your friends come out to vote. Turnout will be very important in this election. At a time when Americans are disillusioned with what's going on in Washington and are throwing up their hands and saying that we don't even want to be involved, this is a chance where you can be involved and can make a difference. So with that, let me turn it over to General McChrystal for a few last words.
Yeah, I want to just start by thanking everyone in this room who has served, everyone who has lived with someone who served, because I can get old, everyone who has a family member, everyone who has a friend, everyone who just simply knows enough to serve, and it doesn't even have to be in uniform. It can be people who serve our community every day. I just want to thank you for that. The mere fact you come here today, when you could be doing something else, to get a little bit more informed so you can make a better choice, is exactly what the country's about. And it's exactly the reason why I'm so excited to be here today, and deeply thankful for all you've done, and deeply thankful for Seth for taking this on. Thank you.